Hello and welcome back to Refractions. I am Stephen Mallon, your host, and I am so happy that we have publicist Pam Sommers joining us. So hello, Pam.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to have you here. So you were a publicist at Rizzoli for 20 years?
A little over 20 years, and I was actually the director of the department.
How many people did you have working there?
Four mostly, sometimes one down, sometimes one up, give or take interns, but mostly four solid people for the last majority of the time that I was there.
So what is that? It's like, I guess we should probably step back a little bit. It's like, talk to me a little bit about the office and the responsibilities that the people that you and the people that were working for you have.
Sure. We're a mid-sized house, but we're Rizzoli. I will never stop referring to Rizzoli as we, even though I'm retired. I'm sure I'll be referring to it as we for on my deathbed. But the house is responsible for about 240 or 50 books a year. That's Rizzoli's own books, its own imprints, plus what are called distribution clients, which are, for example, Flammarion is a French publisher, and Rizzoli distributes all of their English language books in the United States. So my department was also responsible for Flammarion's titles and various other outside publishing houses over the years, but Flammarion's one of the primary ones. In Mondadori, which is the company that bought Rizzoli a number of years ago, they have their own list of English language titles that Rizzoli Publicity also handles. And our responsibility would be to do publicity on all of those books to one degree or another. I mean, certainly star titles get a little bit more attention, but we prided ourselves on really doing as much as possible for every single book on the list. And that, I don't know if you have any sense of what 125 books a season amongst 5 people looks like, but it's a lot. A comfortable number for most professionals doing what we do might be 8 or 10 a season, and we routinely did 18 to 20. So yet somehow have the reputation for being one of the the most efficient and best to work with publicity departments in publishing. So we must have been doing something right.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it helps, of course, to be working on gorgeous books. It's not like we're a house putting out thinner thighs in 30 days kinds of titles that would be agonizing to try and do publicity on. I mean, when you're working on anything from Valentino to to fine Italian cookbooks, it's a lot more fun and more challenging, but definitely more in in the wheelhouse that appeals to me personally, which is why I was there for over 20 years.
When would you get involved with the production of the books?
We would have an early an internal launch meeting, which happens about 6 or 8 months before the season. And that's when the editors present all of their titles. We usually go by editor, so that they can present all of their titles at once. And that's when we hear about what the book, what each of their books is going to look like, get a sense of the overall list of, what the season is going to look like. And it's an opportunity to ask some questions, make sure that somebody's given thought to, do we have image permissions, which is, an afterthought far more often than publicity would like to think. It's like, it was like, oh, I'll find out. And that's not really the answer you want to hear. But it's, it gives you a chance to really see the whole, and of course that happens when you're in the middle of the previous season. So it's just like, there's a period, kind of in the middle where you've got your foot in 3 different seasons, which is just, mind boggling to do, but it's exciting. It's always exciting to see what's coming up in the new season.
So I can imagine, like, you figured, like, radio interviews, the podcasts, there's, print interviews and digital and everything. And like, what are some other things that you would be responsible for?
All of that, social media. There's somebody in-house who focuses on social media more specifically, but it's all of that. I mean, it's print, it's broadcast, and certainly at this point, far more digital coverage than print coverage. Which was just a thing that started out like it would be a little tiny bit of digital. And now it's completely changed, changed the balance. And at first, it's very hard to sell that to an author who wants to see, a page in Architectural Digest or Vogue, and just digital to them was meaningless. So it was a little bit of a bumpy start, especially with more established or seasoned authors or designers who weren't on the cutting edge of that kind of media transition. But now, of course, you can get twice as much real estate, in an individual piece that's digital rather than, you could get a piece this big in print, and you could get 6 images and a whole, 500 words of copy digitally. So I think people have, for the most part, people are acclimatized to digital over print. Although print will always be, my gold standard, but the digital is super important to us as well.
It's so true, right? Because like digital has got the ability to, reach in so many places and times so quickly.
And it's there forever. It's, print for whatever it's worth, is on the newspaper pile at the end of the month, for the most part. But digital does go on forever. And just personally, digital to me always provides, a welcome / unwelcome opportunity to correct small errors that do creep into copy editing. Seems to be something of a lost art. So I'm forever saying, thank you so much for this. If you could just fix the spelling of the author's name, and little things like that. But you do, once something's in print, if it's not correct, it's cringy. But digital is much more nimble about making those corrections for the most part, which is nice.
Totally. Would you track like the imprints at all? Like, would you make any effort to like see how, the placement, or would you just get a general sense that like when things went into the New Yorker versus Vanity Fair, like
we track all of that down to the tiniest mention. We use a proprietary software program that tracks who you're sending things to, what you're sending, what the response was, what the coverage is. It generates reports. So yeah, no, we keep track of all of that for sure.
So when you'd send the press to an individual place, that was already like embedded with a unique like URL or code and everything. So you could tell once they took that material.
No, it allows us to, for each book, we create a press list. So you're tailoring, who you're sending information to based on the book. We don't just have a press list that we send everything to. Although I gather some houses do that. So you end up with editors getting stuff that's not at all germane to their beat, which drives editors, absolutely crazy. We don't do that. We tailor every single list. We have people coded in a very sophisticated way. So we know who the architecture, writers are, we know who the food writers are. So that all goes down. What we would send out is our links to the full book in layout form so somebody can review it, the press release with all the information in it. And then later, once coverage is confirmed, we would send out approved press images and the high-res jacket cover that hopefully they would use as well.
Okay. Trying to think if I got any follow-up on that. Not at the top of my head. When we met it at an event at UBS. Was that something that your office had produced?
It was. At that time, there was a gentleman there who was responsible for kind of creating an internal programming of interesting speakers for for people who worked at UBS. And it was, it was kind of a fun thing. I mean, it was just, we did a couple of events with him, I think. He's no longer there. I have no idea if UBS still does it, but it was just a nice kind of targeted, small, intimate room full of people who would potentially be interested in the topic, and also, ideally buying a copy of the book. Although I think, if I remember correctly, he might have, because sometimes venues will buy the books and gift them if it's a private kind of thing like that. As we discussed before we came on camera, that was a really long time ago, and I don't remember. But most of our events are more public facing. We do a lot of events at the Rizzoli bookstore, which is, people think that's automatic, but it's not. But they do a lot of our, a lot of events for us. But they also, carry books by all the publishers in the world. So they do events for lots of different publishers, not just Rizzoli, even though we're owned by the same parent company. As the name was probably a dead giveaway. But they also, so we do stuff like that. We do a lot at the 92nd Street Y. We used to do stuff at the New York Times Talks. We do a lot of things in other bookstores. We do things in museums. We do events, in all different kinds of venues, again, depending on what the book is and what makes sense. It could be the Center for Architecture. It could be, a food, something in a culinary bookstore, depending on, again, on the title. And, for really high profile things, we would do a launch, say, at Bergdorf Goodman. We did, Fern Malice has a conversation series at the 92nd Street Y called Fashion Icons. And when she came out with volume 2 last year, Nordstrom's, for example, did a huge event for her, not only in the the new New York flagship on 57th Street, but at Nordstrom's around the country. So it just depends on, it was an amazing initiative. And that was based on, on her contacts, but we of course worked with the Nordstrom's team to do, like Rizzoli did, a special box set of volume 1 and 2 that was exclusive to them, for example. So, and we do Rizzoli does do special editions, if the event is big enough, and we've done special editions, sort of deluxe editions for, say, Bergdorf Goodman, if they're doing a big event. So, it just depends.
So that kind of scope and scale of things sounds like it's pretty far out, like it's pretty early, if you're talking about doing like a custom print set of the book for an event, like that's like 2 years out. Like, what's the production?
No, it's more, well, I mean, it's not, it's not something you can decide, 2 months before the event is happening. Like, wouldn't it be great to do this? Although that has happened. For something like a double volume, that would have been part of the initial conversation when the second book was happening. And that in that example, the conversation had already been initiated with Nordstrom, so that was we had plenty of lead time. But we've done shorter lead times, because sometimes the book is the same, but it might have like a clamshell box, and that's easy to retro. You can do that in a shorter timeline, and the book just gets put in the special box or something. But for something like the Tom Ford book, which is Rizzoli's first important fashion title, in like 2006, I think. Excuse me. There was a deluxe edition of the book that was covered. The book itself was black with white, just a white Tom Ford title on the cover, and the deluxe was white calf skin with a black Tom Ford on the cover. So but sometimes it'll be like a deluxe might be a clamshell box with a print in it or something like that. So it just, there are lots of different, there's endless different things you can do depending on the, the budget and the time.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the books, I'm thinking about printing, I'm thinking about the slipcover and events, and I just,
well, you had asked me, like what were some of the biggest hits, and and what for a particular book. And in our world, it's media is very competitive. So to get something in, two important publications is very diplomatically tricky. And I've done, personally handled 3 or 4 books where we've gotten like all the lead magazines all in the same month or 2, all covering the same book, which is, just, close to unheard of, but extremely obviously gratifying. And one of the, just working backwards, my last important book for Rizzoli before I left was a book with Dita Blair, who is just an iconic, social person whose husband was a longtime diplomat for the United States, ambassador rather. And she's very well known for her unbelievable entertaining style and her fashion sense. And this was a book on her entertaining style. And she's much beloved, but it was also just really exciting to work with somebody who's so legendary. But we also got, Harper's Bazaar, the New York Times, New York Magazine, Vogue, W, Women's Wear Daily, World of Interiors. Actually, we didn't get the New York Times. I take that back because too many other things happened and they withdrew from doing something. But just about every possible major thing that we could do, including she did several podcasts, which was just beyond darling because she didn't know, had never done a podcast, had never listened to a podcast. It was in the middle of COVID, so so it was like, just the logistics were extremely tricky, but she was fabulous and a real trooper. So it was just a wonderful kind of last book for me to go out on, because she was, such a dream to work with and such an important and exciting and interesting woman to get to talk to. And sort of, it was the first time that I ever had an author ask me to please stop getting them publicity because it was too much. So that was a first, and it was lovely that it was my last book. But she was a trooper. We really put her through her paces. I don't think she had any idea what it was going to be like, and she was just fabulous to work with. So that was fun. And we had similar. We did books with Corinne Reutfeld, who was the editor-in-chief for many years of French Vogue, and Kate Moss. And those are also books that we got everybody to sort of set aside their internecine battles for primacy, and everybody covered both of those books, which was just but everybody did it in a different enough way so that what they had was special. But in fact, to get Vogue and Harper's and W to all do the same book, and the New York Times is pretty extraordinary, and we were able to do that on a number of titles, which was a lot of fun, and gives you bragging rights to strut around the office and brag about them. So
yeah, I don't remember, or I can't think of anyone else being able to say that about the press coverage. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, no, and fun, and just extremely gratifying, and hard work, but a lot of diplomacy goes into making something like that happen, and a lot of fine tuning and creating special packages of material for each publication, so they're not all publishing the same exact thing. So even though you may think to yourself, well, Kate Moss, anybody would get that, it's not the case. It's it's parceling out special things to each publication, so they do have an original angle and something special.
So they still feel that it's unique, and it is unique to them, to the coverage that they're giving and getting. Exactly.
And, like with the Dita Blair book, somebody might do a food angle, somebody would do a decorating angle, somebody would do her fashion, her fashion history, and and that kind of thing, and did portraits of her, that were very unique for their coverage. So that was great.
This is sounding a lot of work, like you're saying. It's not just like the one email going out to everybody saying, hey, we got this Kate Moss book,
No.
run a story. It's like you're customizing the kit to every publication to,
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's one of those things, unless you've done it or have been part of it, or nobody really understands what kind of goes into into all of that fine tuning to get all of that wonderful coverage for a book. And, there are also cases where a book is absolutely fabulous and it doesn't quite come together, but that's rare, and that's, part of it is not just Rizzoli, but other houses, I mean, there have been, I remember the first season we had, 2 or 3 important interior design books on the same list. My team and I were just hysterical. Like, how are we going to do 2 or 3 books in, design books at the same time? And, I think that my last season there, we may have had 28 interior design books in one season. And, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that just makes everything exponentially more challenging because there's only so much, so much digital space even to go around, let alone print space.
Are you involved with screening or seeing any of the pitches, or have the books already been like confirmed?
By the time we're in internal launch, the book is a fait accompli. So we can ask questions, but I don't know if it's the same at other houses. I had always kind of wished that the publicity department had been part of the acquisitions conversations, because I feel like, as does the rest of my team, we always felt like we had valuable input from our conversations with the media that were not being, that I felt like it was a missed opportunity for the house to not hear that input when it could actually move the decision about a book one way or the other. There have been absolutely wonderful books that we took one look at and knew they were going to be super challenging, or a book that's a little sleeper that I might take a look at and think that book is is going to go gangbusters. And it just it affects the print runs and all of that stuff. I would have liked to have been part of the part of the earlier part of the of the evolution of a book coming in, but it's just not the way the house is set up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the scope and the size, like you were saying, like what did you say, 280 publications?
About 240 books a year.
Yeah, I mean,
and some of them, again, some of them are delivered to us if it's Mondadori, the parent company in Italy, if it's Flammarion. I mean, those books are, we still get presented them at launch, but those, the house doesn't really have any input on whether they get published or not. They're delivered to us, as a fait accompli, as in a similar way that the internal books are presented to the publicity department that way, later in the kind of process.
So what are some things that photographers and artists can do to help their forward-facing look?
That's a great question. I mean, the best thing, any author, but certainly an artist or a photographer, can be, is collaborative. We're counting on their contacts, if they have contacts in the press. We consider it a team effort. Sometimes you'll get, somebody who's very, kind of county. It's like, well, I got that. It's like, that's great that, we're hoping that you have those contacts. It's not, some people take it as a collaborative thing. Some people are more territorial. Some people, it's a very good example of, how you see the world, whether you see it as a glass half empty world or a glass half full world. Just some people, are incredibly appreciative and thankful, and some people are bitter and resentful, and all they see is what you didn't get, which is very hard, because you're working just as hard on those books as you are on ones that, maybe, a little bit easier to push through, in the press. And it's just like being, this should kind of be a given, in and out of publishing. But, if you're nice, you're nicer to work with. And if you are, a martinet or bitter, or, bringing all of your issues to that relationship at the end of your book publishing process, it just makes it, you're not going to be happy. and you're not going to be satisfied because you come in kind of with a mindset that you're not going to be happy, and nothing, that people do can please you. And I just, after many, many years of doing that, you sometimes can predict that, and sometimes you can't. And, you have to roll with it no matter what. But obviously, it's much more fun to work with somebody who's, excited about the process, participatory in the process, and available and answers questions, and is willing to, sometimes people will be very picky about what, where they want to see their book. And, for us, our goal is to, obviously we'd like the author to be happy, but our objective is to sell books. And just because you think X magazine isn't, the exact demographic that you envision for yourself, which may or may not be realistic. I mean, we generally don't pitch, books to inappropriate publications. So it's, you like to see people get excited about all that. And, we've had people reject perfectly appropriate magazines because for some reason they don't think it's the right thing for their book. And that's really frustrating because, it's, everybody has their wish list, which is, all the usual suspects. If it's, if you're an interior designer, of course, you want Architectural Digest and Elle Decor and House Beautiful, and Gallery Magazine and the usual, the usual high level suspects. But, every single design book is not going to make it into, the top 3 or 4 publications. Yeah. So, we get great coverage in regional publications, for example. A magazine called Flower, that's published down south. It's an absolutely gorgeous magazine, that, obviously focuses on literally on florals and gardens and stuff, but they do beautiful interiors, and they, their pages are stunning. And that to me would be, unquestionably get, and, and people, people need to be a little bit more outside the box about where they want to see their work. I don't mean to sound negative, but, the best thing you can do is just consider your publicist, part of your team for the last leg of your book. And, we love working with authors closely. What authors sometimes do, is bring in an outside PR person, which has its pros and cons for sure. If you're going to do that, it would be great to do it very early in the process. If your book's coming out in September, coming to us with, coming to your house with a freelance publicist in July is not a good use of anybody's time, because your pitch has gone, went out 2 months ago. Having, a third party chasing up people you've already been in touch with, you're just, everybody's stepping on everybody's toes, and it's not really fruitful. And the thing is also, a lot of times people will think if they have 2 teams working on their book, they'll get twice as much. And it really, I mean, that's mostly the mindset. Otherwise, because they're paying usually quite a lot to have an outside PR do it. And, if they're working on it solo, the idea that they're going to have this dedicated person who's only working on their projects, of course they're working on, 6 other projects, and you're going to get, you'll get the principal, but most likely you'll get, their assistant or another publicist in their team, who's going to do the exact same thing that we would do in-house. I used to fight that a lot more, and now it's, with a list the size of what ours was, please, if you're more comfortable with an outside PR, but just understand that we're going to expect that person to do the whole package. There's the whole idea of like dividing and conquering. It is kind of like an illusion, that people who don't do what we do think is realistic, and it's not really. We end up doing it, but it actually ends up being more work for everybody, and not necessarily with, twice the results or, twice the level of results, which can be frustrating, for sure. I mean, I've worked on celebrity books where there were 4 teams, And we would have, hour-long phone calls, if not 2-hour phone calls every, 3 or 4 weeks. And I mean, I would, if I was a drinking man, I would be knocking back some vodka before those calls, because they're just, I mean, it's, a Zoom call or a conference call with 8 people on it is, I always feel like the more the efficacy of a call decreases exponentially to the number of people on it. So I'm not a fan of those, but people do feel like they have this team working on their stuff, and it can be very challenging.
I mean, the only thing that I could see where it'd be advantageous to have someone local is maybe in like a regional situation where, like, if you've got like a publicist that's like in LA that knows the local television, that knows the local press, if you're doing something that is like celebrity related,
or an LA based designer, sure.
Yeah.
We of course know all of those people as well. If you're in a market, again, this isn't a category that we do a lot, but if you are based in Indianapolis and you have a PR who knows the Indianapolis market, go with God. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And we would even still be happy to collaborate with somebody. We would focus on the national, if they can, dig in deeply in Chicago or in Indianapolis or Miami, sure, or Northern California or something like that. But it is, but for a more, we do tend to focus on national, just because, that's seen most widely. And I mean, at this point, there are not even book sections of newspapers, regional newspapers. So that's been an evolution that's less fortunate. The sort of death of local news media with robust book review or design sections, which is sad, which is why we've migrated towards digital as much as we have, because that is national by definition, international even.
And then are these costs, like, are these all estimated in the the agreement with the artist? It's like, is this how it?
Well, I again, contracts are all dealt with by editorial, but the fact that they will get publicity efforts, in-house publicity efforts, is standard in their contracts. If somebody's done multiple books or is very sophisticated, they might ask at the contract stage, if they might mention at the contract stage that they want to hire outside. And the sooner my team would know about that, the better, because when we're signing books, if these 4 books have outside PR, I'm not going to assign them to a staff, a team member, although we might have somebody who, supervises or looks after it or acts as a liaison. But yeah, for the most part, it's a given that you will get in-house publicity.
Okay. There's some of the pay-to-play publishing houses, it's like a tiered effort. Like there's, it's like, we'll print your book for this amount of money, and we'll print your book and help promote it for this amount. And,
yeah, that again is more contractual. And to be honest, it's amazing how little I know about stuff like that. It was just, we were not part of that conversation. Although I became more aware, it became more common knowledge, or more shared with us, I should say. Because at this point, I think it's evolved to some degree so that somebody publishing a book is contributing more to it financially than I think either was traditional in the past or that I was aware of in the past. For example, an interior designer might get, an advance. They're going to get an advance, but out of that, they're expected to either deliver or produce all the photography. And if they're somebody who has, had all of their projects professionally photographed as, throughout their career, that's easier. But if they have to go back and shoot projects, or they're shooting new projects, that cost is generally on them, wherever as is, again, I'm this is a little bit fungible. It's not 100% ironclad, but the design, the author or interior designer pays for the book's design, pays for the graphics, the photography, all of that, and they are expected. I think as part of most contracts, authors are expected to purchase a certain number of books. And I believe that's usually contractually indicated. And there, of course, they can buy more books, but that's, at an author discount. But the more information the publishing house has up front, the better able they are to, modulate what they're printing. It's wonderful for an author to buy 1,000 copies, but it's terrible to find that out, when the books are in the warehouse and nobody factored in the author, scooping off 1,000 of the print run, which, so if we know that before the books are printed, that's great. If an author decides that after the print run, the first print run is already in the warehouse or en route, that can be tougher because your book can then be, unavailable if you take 1,000 off the top and nobody factored that into the print run.
Oh, so that's a really interesting angle I didn't think about. Like it's actually, it becomes like a supply chain problem if like someone after the fact goes in and sweeps in and buys too many, and then all these distributors are saying, "Hey, where are my books?" You're like, "Sorry, we don't have them."
And that, in the last couple of years with COVID, supply chain, has been a complete nightmare. I mean, we, it kind of took a while. Like the problems really manifested themselves a little bit later in the pandemic period because, it took a while for stuff to catch up and get log jammed. I mean, I would say 2001 to 2002 season, all of a sudden, ships were backed up. Shipping, just transportation trucks were backed up. Paper availability, was a problem. I mean, every single step of the way, the printer, the paper source, the trucking, because most of our books are printed in Asia or in Europe. So it just all of a sudden every single, it wasn't just like one step, it wasn't just shipping, it wasn't just paper, it was like everything. And I mean, we had a couple of seasons where we scrambled, you didn't even know what hit you. And that was extremely challenging for the production department and our sales team. And then even reprints took, twice as long as they might, under normal circumstances. And it's gotten better, I believe, in the last year, but, it took a long time there were a couple of years in there where it was just, can I say shit show? It was extremely challenging, is what I need to say. And that sort of corporate, those corporate issues, that anxiety, trickles down, and there'd be things where, an author had planned, a lot of events or a tour, and all of a sudden, we didn't have enough books because we didn't know that the author was, had booked 10 events that we found out in like one fell swoop, and so you're always juggling inventory and looking at reprinting and how soon and how many, and all of that. And, I think, again, I don't have experience with that many houses. I was at Taschen before Rizzoli, but I was literally a toddler in terms of publishing and understanding how all of that worked. But at Rizzoli, they try to be conservative with initial print runs. We're not a house. It's not like, Random House with with an Obama autobiography. We're not going to print, 100,000 of something. We print conservatively and count on a nimble turnaround for sometimes where, the house is looking at reprints before the first print run is delivered. So that, it's very closely watched, because they, and it was always a little bit of a struggle between sales and publicity, because they would want to know what publicity was confirmed when we didn't even have layouts to send out yet. So, you know, there was a little bit of a disconnect that was kind of like, you know, an ongoing endemic problem, because we don't have that information as early as they would like to see it to make decisions. You know, it's like a domino thing. So that kind of pressure just kind of adds to the general pressure. You know, you're trying to get, you know, and you can go to people super early, but you're going to get people say back to you, geez, it's super early. I don't know yet. You know, I don't know what we're doing in September if you're asking me in January. So we're, you know, it's always a bit of a communications disconnect that we were always trying to close that gap for, you know, for sales.
It's such a weird dynamic, you know, it's like, oh, I wish we had heard about this sooner, and you're telling us too soon. You know,
Yeah.
there's like that weird timing, and it's different from every single like publication, every single relationship about their turnaround and like what's on the agenda for them. Like if they know that their annual book that's coming up on, you know, the textile industry, you know,
Yeah.
like, but some people all of a sudden, like they're going to be doing textiles and we have to scramble and get all of our, you know.
Exactly. Or, you know, or the thing, if, you know, if I pitched a fall book to people in, you know, in early April, and I don't hear from them, and I chase them up in June, it's like, well, it's too late. I wish I'd known earlier. It's like, you know, I sent this to you, and you know, and right here I have it in front of me in April 13th, you know, and it's just, you know, but again, you know, editors, you know, get 1,000 emails a day, you know, from 50 of me, you know, and I try to be aware of that, and you know, and you chase up, you know, I work with somebody. You know, because I might chase something up, you know, 2 months later, and she's like, I chased it up 2 days later. It's like, well, how many books are you working on? You know, it's like, oh, one. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's just hard. And, you know, it's just, you're always trying to balance, and, you know, it's a very fluid thing. And it's just, you do as much as you can in the, you know, in the most efficient way that you can to get as much results, you know, as many results, and as, you know, as strong results. So it's a definite balancing act, and it's an enormous amount of, you know, of labor and follow through. And, you know, we prided ourselves. I mean, my department, I think I figured out when I was leaving that my team had been with me for like something like a combined 60 years altogether, which is, you know, kind of unheard of. Jessica, who's, you know, Jessica Knapp, who was my associate director for many years, and who moved into my position when I retired. She was with us for over 16 years. You know, the next person up had been with us 12 years. The third one had been with us in different capacities, and then, you know, kind of more regular for like 8 or 10 years. I mean, our you know, and we had one person who started with us during the, you know, just at the beginning of the pandemic, actually. And, you know, she's just, you know, just fabulous. So, I mean, I was blessed with a really amazing team of people for a really long time. And you really become, you know, it's just like we brainstorm, we pitch each other's books. We're not territorial or proprietary. I mean, everybody, has ideas for everybody else. It's like, hey, where would you send this book? I mean, again, I don't know what other teams are like. I just know that my team was absolutely fabulous to work with, and so talented and so creative and so hardworking, as you would have to be with the kind of list that the house publishes. So that I felt very blessed to have them, and really I miss all of them, and I'm very actively in touch with my whole team, because I am actually working on one book that for the fall list, but that I think that will be I don't know how many more books I'll want to work on, especially if I'm going to try and be traveling extensively, which is definitely a goal. So that but I take each day, who knows, I'm working on a couple of different freelancing, some of them not even book related, but just all different kinds of things like that. So,
and like you said, with the digital world, there's no reason you can't be working from Belgium on a number of these things,
true. because I did spend a month in Paris last spring, and was it was working from Paris for the month, so it was kind of great because with the time difference I didn't have to be at my desk until 3 p.m, so it was so brilliant. It really worked out. But I took a laptop, which I won't be doing on this trip because I'm doing too much moving around. I don't want to. I have like a fetish about traveling light, so. But I'll be finishing up a fall book that I'm working on because events will be happening in October and I'll be away. But
and you can just take an actual trip and vacation and leave it all back, and then. Yes,
because my boss, as far as my boss was concerned, I was off the grid. But whenever I traveled, I was always in daily touch with my team for anything that just to stay on top of it and not for them not to feel over. Because I've always, even when I was on staff, I like to, if I go away, I never would go for less than 2 weeks, or 3 if I could get away with it. So I didn't like the team to feel like, they were fully carrying my projects while I was away. So I would always, kind of touch down and, try and stay on top of things so that they weren't trying to figure stuff out. I mean, we always leave each other really, really good notes. And I always had a fetish about, I drove everybody crazy because I like things recorded and summarized in like 2 or 3 different places. Because my philosophy, the way I ran my department is like, if any one of you like falls in a manhole, I want to be able to sit at your desk and know where, the status of everything. I don't want to have to go digging or figuring stuff out. I want to open this and see. And I drove them absolutely crazy with having to have, things in, a certain Excel form and in a program and, notes, that were in some ways redundant, but it just,
redundancy is so important because one coffee cup
really
on the wrong computer and the wrong hard drive can like do a lot of damage.
So it was always evolving, like finding the ideal ways to keep track of, because the volume is just really indescribable. I mean, it's hard to understand again if you're not in it, of like the volume of the outreach, the volume of follow-up, the volume of keeping track of the actual coverage, the status of it. It's just a phenomenal amount of information. And if you don't have it well organized, and you're operating in in the dark, and somebody else needs to jump in on one of your projects, it's extremely difficult.
So if someone is not fortunate enough to get to Rizzoli, like when should someone hire the external publicist? Like when should you start?
If your book is a fall book coming out in September, you should be having conversations, fruitful conversations, not just kind of like putting out feelers in March.
March 6th. So March. What's the math?
April,
6 months.
May, June, July. Yeah. And people structure their deals in different ways. Some people work with a monthly retainer. Some people do a flat fee for the entire project. Excuse me. Some people focus on tours and like a tour schedule. That I will say is something like if a book an author wants to hire somebody to do nothing but their events, go with God. That is the most useful extra thing you can hire. So if somebody wants to do an active, interior designers will want to go to design weeks around the country, will want to go to different showrooms, will want to go, because a big part of why an interior designer does a book is as a calling card, is to get new business. So they will want to talk in different parts of the country because they conceivably procure new clients by doing so. So if you have somebody, because we're not set up to do detailed tour schedules, it's just, doing a tour and all of the details and the logistics of that is like a full-time job by itself. Yeah. So if somebody hires, somebody has a really crackerjack person in their office, great. Or if they hire somebody to focus on that, that's fabulous. I do suggest that people talk to the publisher, talk to their editor, talk to the head of publicity at the house they're working with early before they jump in and hire somebody. and get a feel for the house, get a feel for, I would meet with, authors early all the time, so you have a sense of what the department looks like, what you could expect from the house. And you may come away thinking, oh, that was a bullet dodge. I don't need to hire somebody. They're going to be great to work with. And if it's a project that I have a sense isn't going to get the attention that that person is going to want and need, for whatever reason, I would absolutely be supportive of them hiring somebody outside. Just be realistic about what that looks like, and don't expect to have, a full-on program from in-house as well as the outside person you're hiring. I mean, that isn't going to work well for you or either party. And of course, and if you're bringing somebody in like very late, I super urge people not to do that. It's, because of course an outside publicity company will be happy to take your money, but if you're bringing somebody in to start on your book when efforts have already been made on your behalf, or it's 2 months from pub date, there's a limit to what they're going to really be able to do. And it then becomes, it's like, some outside PR. It's like, we got a feature in House and Garden. It's like House Beautiful. It's like, I've been talking to House Beautiful for 3 months, so it may have happened since you came on, but it just becomes, and nobody, I don't have the time, or the effort, nor does my team, for pissing contests, but you end up in a lot of scenarios like that, because the person that somebody's paying a ton of money to wants to look like they're earning it. Yeah. And I have tons of friends and nothing but respect for people who do outside PR, but it's, it's a little bit diplomatically tricky. And if you're the author, if you're a photographer, it may be worth your while to do it, but just do it the right way and talk to your house person before.
That makes sense.
And I would also say, if you're seeing this book as a cog in the wheel of your overall career, and moving your career forward, that's a different kind of PR, and that's absolutely fabulous. But you should not expect the book PR team to be working on your overall career. It's not our job to promote you as a photographer. It's our job to sell the book. Yeah. And that can get a little bit tricky. And that's an instance where it would very much be worth somebody's while to have a PR person or team dedicated to their career publicity, getting them, to the right editors, and the book becomes a tool in that effort rather than the tail that's wagging the dog.
Yeah, because that kind of meetings and setup, like you can use the book is an asset, but they're not the right like venue or direction for the sales. It's useful for the photographer, but not necessarily for the publishing house. So you're not going to focus on going after those relationships. Or
yeah, I mean, I would love to be, and of course it's a gray area. It's not like hard and fast, but if you're expecting to become a better known photographer, you will become a better known photographer if your book is successful, and that making the book successful is our job. But if you're looking for somebody to, kind of be liaising between you and editors for jobs, or publications, that's not what we do. And you're going to be disappointed if that's your expectation. So that's a case where having outside representation is definitely a bigger global effort, and that does make sense. And that person can then use your book as a tool to secure, and that's 100% valid. So that's something we do, and a lot of times photographers, but especially artists, will have gallery relationships, and that becomes another entity in the conversation. And we worked with tons of galleries and reps. Reps are a little bit different. I mean, a photographer's rep or an artist's rep or even, an author's agent. Like we try and steer clear of agents in the publicity department, because that isn't generally fruitful for us, and can make it, is actually a little bit of a challenge. It can be, because they're coming at it from a very different perspective. The agent is invaluable when you're signing your contract and working out your deal for the book to be published. But an agent, for the most part, in my opinion, doesn't have a place in the publicity end of things, and is often can be an obstacle, can be challenging for that. And again, it's a lot of times it's an agent trying to look like they're on top of everything, and I don't want to be the thing the agent is on top of, which is often the case, and not to anybody's benefit, I don't think so. Yeah.
So Pam, this has been amazing. We are actually out of time. This has been such a good conversation. Thank you. I appreciate so much about the insight, and I learned so much in this conversation. So I really appreciate everything you shared.
I hope I wasn't too negative. I feel like I was speaking more about the pitfalls than the joys, but having doing a book and having a book come out is a huge joy. And I always remembered and was very aware, and hoped my team would be very aware, that this person has just spent 2 years making this thing, and they're very excited, and they may put a foot wrong, but it's all in an effort to promote this wonderful thing that they've spent a lot of time, effort, and often money to create. And I always keep that in my mind, because it doesn't just spring up. It's something that somebody has put an enormous amount of thought and effort into, and it's their baby. And authors can sometimes get a little spun out, like as close to pub date, because their baby's about to make its debut in the world. And you try and be aware of that too, and to be their advocate and their partner, and get their baby in front of the as many people who are likely to love it as much as they do. So at the end of the day, that was always our goal, and I know that's continues to be the Rizzoli Publishing team's goal.
Well, it sounds like you had a lot of amazing success. So congratulations.
Definitely.
On
thank you.
20 years. And thank you so much for talking with us. Thank you, B&H, as always, for hosting. I am going to be back next week with photographer Mark Peterson. And I'm going to be looking forward to talking to him about his work and all the events that he has been covering, because they're just quite challenging and interesting. So thank you, B&H. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.